being laid off is really challenging. No matter who you are, it's going to challenge you emotionally, even potentially spiritually, physically. I've seen people, they start having health challenges as well. No matter how confident you are, it's still a little bit of an ego hit.
No Talkers, a show featuring stories not from the talkers, but from the action takers. Hopefully, these stories will inspire you as a listeners in your challenging times and to achieve your dreams. This is episode 1. I am speaking with Henry Carr out of Austin, Texas, who took laid off as a signal from the universe and pursue his dream of entrepreneur. He's ex-Uber and he comes with rich corporate grinding experience. Over to you, Henry. Thanks for joining the show. And by the way, for my dear listeners, if you have one similar or any inspiring stories, just fill the form, link in this episode description. Let's begin.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm actually building 2 startups.
Fantastic. To begin with, Henry, can you just tell us something about the Stealth startup?
Yeah, great. I put stealth startup because both startups are very small. I actually started as an advisor for both, really resonated with what they were trying to do and the teams that were building them. And my initial role was just to bring some of what I've learned and my experience and gifts that I was privileged to gain from my experience at Uber, building Uber Eats as one of the early operational leaders for Uber Eats. One of them is for e-commerce in Latin America, and it's a very manual system right now. Consumer product goods companies to supply those, it's just a really challenging, inefficient system. We're trying to digitize that with an e-commerce platform. So that's that one business. And then the other business is more close to home for me in terms of it's in the US and it's in the media space. And it's really about, you have actors that are in movies, TV, commercials, etc. And then you have extras that are always in the background. And maybe some of those listening have been an extra in some sort of movie or TV show. But there's this thing in the middle called real people, and real people are things like a nurse or a doctor or a yoga guru or even just anyone who does yoga, and they need that for a commercial. They don't want actors to pretend. They want real people to be in that commercial so it's authentic. And so I'm working with some casting directors and some producers.
Wow, this is very unique.
And the nice thing about that one is for family who maybe they're working hard during the week, maybe making ends meet, and they're just like, oh wow, I can just show up as a family, be in a local grocery store's commercial and grill in a backyard and just have fun, and I get paid a couple $1,000s to just show up for a weekend being myself and eat some good food. That's not only is that
fantastic.
Like nice income, but it's also a fun opportunity.
Henry, would you like to disclose those 2 names or?
Yeah, so we're actually going through some branding right now. So at some point, let you know, and then we'll put those in the podcast or something, or linked.
Good one. Yeah, looking forward to have the follow-up podcast on those 2 startup stories. What was the moment, or what was the thought that came when you thought of, after 13 years of corporate life, you want to now help the community and you want to get into starting something your own? What was the thought process or that triggered, and then, because it's very hard. I mean, I am already here in my corporate career for almost 16 years. But when I think of leaving the corporate and just doing something full-fledged, it's scary.
Oh, that's a great question. And yes, 16 years, it definitely resonates. Yeah, I think I was in for 13, as you said. And part of it wasn't my choice. At the beginning of COVID, it was Uber, and Uber was about the main piece of Uber, the majority of the business was rides business. And when the world locked down, rides business plummeted. Now, I happened to be part of Uber Eats, which actually had a large increase, as well as some of the other growth businesses. But the company itself had to go through a big transformation, and you'll see articles about how many people were laid off. They don't all tell the full story because it was in waves. And so I was part of about 9,000 people that were laid off, and it was right after the first wave, the pandemic. And it just so happened, it was also, I got the call on Sunday, or Monday, and that was the official call. And then my wedding was on Saturday. So I got laid off the same week as my wedding, which for all the types of things going on in life, that's hard, but it's not nearly as hard as those that are getting laid off that have visa issues or on maternity or paternity leave, or have other challenges, health issues, maybe on a mental disability leave. So so I just feel for those folks that have gone through that. I know some folks who were on that. Mine was just this weird juxtaposition of love and fear, like the most I've ever felt at once in my life. And my first LinkedIn post that I mentioned earlier, and my first social post ever, I put out about 10 days ago, and that's how you and I connected, was really because I saw so many other people getting laid off, and in my network, people, friends of friends, etc. And I was like, I was laid off 3 years ago. I did everything I could to kind of put on a positive spin to it and say, see it as an opportunity, see it for growth, see it as, the universe's sign. And I did it for a while. I lived that positive feeling for a while, despite the fear and whatnot. And then at a certain point, I kind of broke. And I say it was my personal rock bottom in a way, but rock bottom is so relative, and it's not like I wrapped my car around like a power line or something like that. It was just, I felt like a shadow of myself. 5.5 years at Uber, I really didn't give back the way I wanted to. So I'm going to dive deep into that. Now it's time to take a bet on myself and assume that if I can connect myself with some good people, this will work. And so I did that for a while. And then during that period is when I kind of broke and I became a shadow of myself. And I had to go through this kind of 8-month transition that's kind of turned around my whole outlook on life, which we can get into at some point. And so, I guess to your question is what made me, just to recap, it's what made me decide. I went on that long story and I didn't actually answer your question, so sorry about that, Divyesh. But the reason I decided it was time was I needed to stop procrastinating on it. I was coming up with every single excuse not to do it. I was reading books on startups. I was, listening to podcasts. I even coming into this, I was like, okay, cool. I'll write down a list of all the books I was reading on startups and personal development and whatnot. It's like Never Too Late to Start Up, Why Startups Fail, The Startup J Curve, The Founder's Dilemma, Start at the End, 0 to 1. All those books, I'd read them. I'd done my best to internalize, but it's I'm never going to learn until I actually try. And it's I have to take a step to go and do it.
Fantastic.
And I've learned now, which I didn't know then, and it's if I'm just looking back, it's feedback is given on direction. Let me explain that. So I'm not sure if you all use satellite navigation like Google Maps, Waze, etc. When you turn it on, your phone kind of knows the direction you're facing, and it kind of knows where you're going, but you don't really start getting directions until you start moving. And once you start moving, it's oh, okay, yes, you're heading down this road. You're not heading the other direction on this road. You're heading this direction on the road. Okay, now you need to make a right. And so you need to start moving in a way to start getting the directions. And if you believe that there is something out there, higher consciousness, God, whatever you want to call it, the universe, that's kind of directing and helping you, then you just need to start tuning in and listening in. And so you only start getting feedback until you start doing it. It's like if you're in a corporate world meeting and you ask your manager for feedback on how you did leading a meeting, and you're like, well, you haven't even started leading the meeting yet. How can I give you feedback? And so it's like, you got to start leading. You got to start leading that meeting. And it doesn't mean you have to quit your job and go and do it. Like, do it on the side. Or if you do have the benefit of having some financial security or a spouse that's making money, it's like, try out a few things, get connected with some folks, but start doing it, like going through the motions, because you'll learn so much more. And, just taking action, no matter how small, is the key to making progress. So just, if you have the idea, then write down the idea and go and talk to someone about it.
Fantastic.
That maybe knows a little bit more, just a little bit further on the journey.
Got it.
And that could just open your eyes to something bigger. And it's like, who cares if that meeting goes poorly? It's like, there's a million investors out there. And there's hundreds of millions of people that love weighing in on other people's ideas. So like, go, and if they say it sucks, then cool, either they don't know what they're talking about, or they have some feedback, and that's like a sign from the universe that you need to that's like hey, wait, you just went right, you need to go left here. Okay, cool. Tune in, listen to it.
Perfect, Henry. Well, you open Google Maps, you put destination, but you have to move, right? If you're walking, you have to still give the movement, so that then only app will show the next direction, right?
Yeah, and if you're trying to think about well, what's next? What's that next move? You brought up the idea of the destination. That's awesome. If you know the destination, but being wedded to that destination and linked to it and putting a lot of importance in that destination can actually be counterproductive, because that's the one difference here. It's like, you can put in the destination and then just be open to that destination changing. Like I said before, what are the stats? 9 out of 10 startups fail. And then the 10% that do succeed, 66% of them had to pivot pretty significantly. So that means your original destination that you're putting in, if you're interested in startups, has at best a 3% chance of actually being the correct destination. And so when you think about it like that, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to need a pivot. I know there's a likelihood of failure. And even if my first idea fails, if you look at all the successful entrepreneurs, I would say it's probably, I've never done the math, but I'd assume it's a tiny fraction of them were successful in their first startup. I meditated on this podcast before we started this morning. It was just my morning meditation. I do it every morning. That's the first thing I do when I get up. It's the thing that gets me super excited.
Wow.
And it just came to me from the field. And it's like, if you are thinking about doing a startup, or you're not even sure if you want to do a startup, or you're in your job and you're thinking about leaving, I thought of 3 tips. And I'm going to start with these 3 tips. I'm going to start with an explanation. They all start with feel. And this is weird for me. And this is the thing that I've learned over the last 8 months. I have an engineer's brain. It's an identity. It's a label. It's I've never actually, I did engineering internships. I never practiced fully as a professional, but I just know that's how my brain works. So I'm very analytical. I use the left side of my brain a lot, and I think a lot. I overthink. My mom loves to joke that for a while, she doesn't anymore because I've changed, but it's you think every problem can be solved with a spreadsheet. And it's I know, wondering where I should live, spreadsheet. Problem at work, spreadsheet. Issues with, a spouse or girlfriend, spreadsheet. I just weigh the pros and cons, figure it out, do some analysis, and I'll come to an answer. But each of these tips is about feel, because your thinking brain plays tricks on you. It's it's held back by fears, it's held back by your biases, etc. And so each one of these has a feel. So the 3 tips to decide what to do next. The first one is feel your why. Don't analyze your why, feel your why. Why am I thinking about this change? Why do I want to go start a startup? What are those basic concerns or needs that are driving it? Because we all want to progress, we all want to get better. But growth comes from the struggling moments that we choose to make better. And so It's like, what are those struggles I'm going through? And the struggle doesn't have to be painful. It could be a struggle with desire. It could be a struggle with like, I want to give back more and I don't know how. It could be work related, career, money, family, education, your body, spiritual, the world itself, recreation. You just want to like have more freedom and play. It's your dignity. I don't feel like a human in this job. I feel like I'm just like, wallowing away. And so whatever that is, but really, first, you do have to think. You have to use your brain and think about it, but then shut off your brain and just feel. And feel like, what does it feel like to not have dignity in my current job or feel trapped in my current job? Like, what does that feel like? And then fast forward a year from now and say, what would it feel like if I made the change that I'm thinking about? And how, like, what would that mean towards those feelings? What would my dignity feel like? What would it feel like for my family when I can like come home because I don't have a long commute, and I can be there with like my wife and my child for dinner more often? Like, what would that feel like? And again, don't think the feeling, feel the feeling. So that's the first tip. And I'll repeat these at the end. I should have maybe just listed them all off.
And Henry, while you were telling, right, I'm just telling you, I just closed my eyes and I was just visualizing what you just mentioned, right? You start with feeling your vibes and then you again visualize after you reach to your destination, right? I mean, after you reach to whatever you are thinking about starting up, right?
Wow.
How it gives you feeling, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. And for you specifically, it's like, you want to have a podcast that inspires others. Well, imagine the day that you are putting out your 100th podcast and your 1,000th person is writing you and said, your podcast really inspired me. Like, what would that feel like? What if you woke up every single morning and just closed your eyes and felt that feeling? What if in the middle of the day when you're like struggling to like put out that next podcast or like, oh my God, I'm not finding someone to do it with. And then you just did that feeling like something's positive is going to happen. You're going to get an inspiration or something that's going to help. So that's the first. The second tip is feel your situation, but feel where I'm at right now and what it is that I am most afraid of. And what it is that I can do to like de-risk that a little bit. And you don't have to de-risk everything. You're never going to come up with a perfect plan, but it's like, okay, just be realistic about that situation. It's like, okay, feel, and again, I stick with feel because it's easy for your brain to come up with overanalyze and say, okay, here's all these things that could go wrong. Okay, cool. But then if you just say feel, and it's like, okay, but what would it feel like if some of those things went wrong? And it's like, probably not that bad. And if it did go bad, I could probably it would probably be a great growth experience. It's taking me out of my comfort zone. So, but you do want to be realistic. It's like, I'm not going to like invest, all of my savings into this company because like that would put my family at risk. And we just had a child and we just got married, etc. I don't want to do that. So just feel out your situation. All right. Does that make sense?
Yes. So basically what you're trying to say is there are two things. One is, of course, you need to analyze. That's where comes the spreadsheet. That's what you just mentioned, so that you will get idea whether you are risking or not risking. But you got to listen to your feelings.
Yeah. Because again, the mind will play tricks, but your feelings will you just believe that your feelings will help lead the way. This is where this all comes together with the last one, which is feel your next move. Your job is not to figure out your final destination. Your job is not to figure out the finish line or even the next 10 steps. It's just to figure out the next move. Because your situation's evolving. It will change. Your whys may change. And so you're just like, based off of my whys, based off of my situation, I'm just going to do the next move that feels aligned with my whys and makes my situation maybe either neutral or somewhat better. Doesn't make my situation worse, but makes it somewhat better that I can just feel good like I'm moving in the right direction. And then you just tune in and you listen. But do those 3 steps. You can do them a little bit every day, and it's not long. It takes like 2 minutes to like think about my why, remind yourself of your why. The first time it will take a little while, but then just a reminder of those. And I'm saying this because I'm just learning how to live it. I'm not an expert at this, and I hadn't even articulated these 3 things until this morning. They kind of came to me. But feel your why, feel your situation, feel your next move, and then just let go of the need for control of that. It's like the how is none of your business. If you figure out the next move, listen to the set, like the Google Maps that tells you if you're in the right direction. And sometimes if there's no feedback, that can be a good thing, because usually feedback is like, it's pretty heavy and it's a negative and you're like, oh, okay, I got to shift. But if there's no feedback, then okay, cool. Then what would be the next step towards my why, towards bettering my situation, towards what I'm trying to achieve? And if that's a startup, great. If it's just finding a new job, that's just as good.
But about feel your situation, maybe I can give one example. Imagine one of the person who is struggling in his current job. Basically, he's not happy with the job. He wants to start into anchoring, and slowly he wants to move completely to that journey. So how you connect with these 3 steps, right?
Yeah. So I'll start with the second one and I'll talk about the other 2. So the second one, feel your situation. So this is, he's in a job he doesn't like. Not related to your why, not related to your next move. It's, okay, what's my financial situation? If I were to quit tomorrow and pursue this full on, what would that mean for myself, my family, both, my immediate and extended family? So, because someone who made a decent amount of money, is single, doesn't have like a kid that's maybe like, whatever, that's going to be a very different situation than someone that has a kid that has medical issues, has grandparents, like parents that need to live in their own house with them, etc. So just feel out that situation, and like, because your why is different than your situation. Your situation is like, okay, if I were to just, if I were to really follow this passion, what would it mean for those around me? And is that kind of a detriment? And so I could go full on, or I could dabble in it a little bit, and then my next move might not be quitting my job. My next move might be changing my perspective about my job in a way that like, I see myself as like kind of almost like a secret agent in this job. Like, sure, my manager sucks, the job sucks, whatever, but I'm now here just looking like I'm going to do what I can to succeed at this job and like not, get fired for just not caring. But really what I'm doing in the meantime is trying to connect with people at this job that could help me on my path towards being an anchor. I'm taking time during my breaks, instead of just like, going in the lunchroom complaining with other people about it. I'm actually watching podcasts on anchors or connecting with people on LinkedIn and sending them messages that can help me on this path. And so it's like, yeah, sure, my job hasn't changed, but the way I'm looking at my job has changed, because I see it now as a means for helping me towards my why, and helping me achieve. And so hopefully that made sense.
Oh yes. It basically totally changes your perspective, right? How you look at it. And so all your step 3s are like interconnected, and always whenever you off track, just revisit these 3 steps. Exactly.
And it just lowers the importance, because like, it's okay if these evolve. You can't get it wrong. You can't run out of time. So it's, and again, I just came up with this idea because this is kind of what I've been living the last 8 months, without really realizing it. So I'm gonna start doing this more regularly. But when I meditate every morning, this is in a way kind of what's happening in that meditation. So hopefully that makes sense. And thank you for giving an example, like a real world example of someone who might be a listener, how they could apply it.
Yes, I'm slightly turning my angle to the current situations, the turbulent time. People are just lay off. The situation is not so good, because you yourself have gone through that situations, and how you already mentioned in that post. But would you like to add something?
Totally. So the first thing, being laid off is really challenging. No matter who you are, it's going to challenge you emotionally, financially, even potentially spiritually, physically. I've seen people go through it, and it just like, they start having health challenges as well. No matter how confident you are, it's still A little bit of an ego hit. We're living on Earth. Earth is like school. You could call it Earth School. And our purpose on Earth is to learn, grow, evolve. Earth just operates in interesting ways where, just like in school, it's like if you're in 6th grade and you're ready for middle school, or let's say 8th grade and you're ready for high school, you think you're ready for high school. Well, you're going to get tested. You're going to get tested. You don't just get to go to high school without passing any tests. Like, you have to pass the test of 8th grade. And if you fail that test, you stay in 8th grade. And then you have to take another test. And the other test is not quite the same as the test you took before. It's similar themes, but it's different. But then when you pass, you move up. Well, when I got laid off, in a way that was the universe telling me, like, I needed to shift. And then I got into the startups, and then I did it again. So I essentially failed the test 4 times. But for me, the layoff was like the biggest signal that I needed to change. And I'm so grateful now for that layoff, because it put me in a position out of the corporate world, out when I didn't have the security blanket of like the finances coming in, or even that as like kind of the golden handcuffs that was like forcing me. Now it was like I was on my own. I was just giving my all. I was investing my time and my money, not even making the money. So I didn't even have that to justify working as hard as I was. And so all in all, I guess that's a long way of saying, like, if you can lower the fear and the importance of the layoff as a negative and just see it as, this is Earth's way of helping me grow, and this is a test, and what am I going to do with this test to graduate to the next level of higher consciousness, then hopefully that will uncover what your next move is. It will help you uncover your why. It will help you uncover, better understand your situation, so that you can make really big progress and find your gifts. Maybe you learn some gifts in that corporate world that now your job is to give those gifts out to others. And that's, in my post, that was this is my way of testing that out. I'm going to show up on my journey, and I could be at a different place. I'm going to show up differently for people. Some people I'll be ahead of, some people I'll be side to side, and some people I'll actually be behind. And it's interesting because the people who have engaged with that, both in the comments, but then also just message me directly, because maybe they're like me and they don't like posting on comments. And I just tell myself, I'm going to create value by helping them see their life and their situation and the challenges they face, hopefully in a different way. I'm just going to help them reflect. If they ask me a bunch of questions, I'll answer. They can ask me no questions. I can just ask them questions. And my hope is that they come out of it with one next step.
You just connected again your 3 steps, which you just mentioned before. In LinkedIn, people can reach out to you, Henry, right? Because I feel Henry is very open, approachable. That's why I am having podcast with Henry as well, to get this valuable insights, which can help someone somewhere struggling or not struggling, but it will indeed help someone.
Austin, Texas. So LinkedIn, you may not be able to find, you can always do an advanced search and look up the location. So Austin, Texas, Henry Carr. And message me, feel free. I will say it's like the 10-ish calls that I did, it took time, but it was probably the most fulfilling aspect of my week. And who knows, when you listen to this, my calendar, my ability to free up time for calls may be overwhelmed at that point, but right now it's open, and I'm going to probably I'm telling myself I'll put out another post to kind of fill the next week or two. And you don't have to be laid off, or you don't have to be interested in a startup. It could just be you have a struggle. You have a struggle that you don't, you're not quite, for me, it's like the reason why I found I had so much benefit from a guide and accountability buddies, which I have these 2 guys that are in Canada. I have a WhatsApp group with them, and we just message each other all day, or random times a day. The benefit for me was just having someone that was authentic, vulnerable, non-judgmental, willing to ask questions, and willing to help me reflect. And it's like I've nothing to gain. Well, I have personal to gain because I'm learning about this field and it's really reinforcing some of these things. Even talking to you, it like forced me in my meditation to kind of come up with some ideas so I sounded like somewhat useful to have impact. And so it is it's like I find it beneficial, but like if you just have something that like I feel like I've been in this job, or I feel like I've been telling myself I want to change, and then a year goes by and it's the same. And it's like I'm stuck in this job, or I've told myself I wanted to do this and like take a big move. Like I lived in the same city, but I want to make a big move. And it's like a year goes by and I'm in the same city. I haven't made that move. It's like, I'm just happy to talk through that. And, yeah, sure, you could go to a therapist and they're classically trained in this, or, whatnot, or go to someone who's classically trained. That's cool. Do it. But if it's a 30-minute conversation that can add some value, happy to help be part of your journey.
Fantastic, Henry. Henry, I would like to say about you, it's like a book which is just in front of my table. If you do not find best friends, there is a book you just open, of course, a good book, and then you just read something. It just helps. Same thing, Henry, when you just announce about this, right, that people can approach, and then, you can just guide them based on your time availability, of course, but then it can help someone somewhere. Thanks a lot, Henry, for having featured on this podcast. And we wish really that you help many and many startups grow big, and you also help the people to gain the personal growth as well. You might want to subscribe, review, and comment whichever platform you're using to listen this voice. This is Divyesh. Thank you. If you are still listening to this show, No Talkers, signing off. Goodbye, listeners.